Well, hello and welcome to the show. Today on the All Red Everything podcast, I've got Mr. Brendan Thomas, who is actually joining me via the internet from the land of the long white cloud. Brendan, welcome. Mate, how are you?
Really good. Great to be here, Scott. Appreciate you having me.
Mate, bloody good to have you. We've had a few technical woo-wahs, as is always the case when setting up a call. But I'm pretty pumped to have Brendan on today. So he has a couple of sports management agencies, Promondo Sports and Space Collective. And we've got a bit of a funny story about how we met and how all this unfolded. Because, mate, we were at a little ring-ding event over in the UK earlier this year.
We were. We bumped into each other, didn't we, at Goodwood?
Mate, indeed.
Over there.
Because you were over there with a Red Bull athlete, because turns out you've done a bit with the company that gives you wings over the years. And I saw you, so you were standing there with Mad Mike Whiddett. Anybody in the drifting and entertainment world would be familiar with his shenanigans. It's the 10-foot flames out the back of the quad rotor that always tickled my fancy. But mate, you blokes were there minding your own business, and I rocked over and said, Mike, wonderful to see you at this little event here at Goodwood. But what I'm really excited about is when you let it rip at World Time Attack Challenge in Sydney. Not realising that Mr. BT here has a little bit to do with that event as well, because he and I had never crossed paths. So, yeah. That was our intro.
We were standing there, and I just remember distinctly this Aussie voice just picked through all the different and I guess you'd say people that were in the crowd in that special zone, and you were next to a pretty beautiful looking old F1 car with Mr. Michael Lyon, and you just said, this event's all right, but World Time Attack's where it's really at. And we just cracked up because I do a bit of work with Mr. Ian Baker and World Time Attack, and help him with a bit of the talent management side of stuff there, and cracks me up, mate. Wasn't expecting to hear that.
No, absolutely unbelievable. And the Aussie accent does punch through fairly severely in the United Kingdom, I have noticed, with their Queen's English, and us here just fucking it up. Like, we're just brutalising it. But yeah, that was a wonderful introduction, because I was there with as you mentioned, Michael Lyons, and in James Hunt's old Formula One car. That's now my claim to fame. I tell people that I was number 2 spanner man on a Formula One car at Goodwood, but I do actually tell them this as well. I can't take too much. When they've got to crack the wheel nuts on it, what I would do, they call it cupping, and I'd get there, 2 hands underneath, and they'd just be there trying to crank the bloody wheel nuts off. That was actually my job. That and squeegeeing all the shit off the car. Those were my 2 official jobs. The only other thing I figured out was the V-Box. I got pretty good at that because I was the only one that understood technology. So
mate,
yes.
You did well. You finished on the podium.
Mate, and I can't say I can't take any credit for, maybe I can take a little bit of credit for how clean the car was. That would have given some additional aero. But yeah, Mike drove the pants off that thing.
He did.
What did he come? My brain's a bit fuzzy here. It was either second or third. Like, he was in...
It was third overall.
Third overall. Yeah. He was right at the pointy end.
Incredible, especially in, I think it was the 1976, wasn't it? So
76, 77. And it's not an easy car to drive by any stretch. And, mate, that man can send it.
He can. He can steer.
Oh.
And what a beautiful man he is as well.
Mate,
just a great man to talk
lovely
to.
fella. And I'm still harassing him, actually. I'm pretty keen to see some old F1 bangers over here in Australia. So we're going to have to keep working on that.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a plan on that one, mate. So let's look back around on that.
Ooh, yeah, we'll work on that off the air. I've been razzing him. He was actually at Las Vegas. He was working Formula One over the recent event, doing some of the work, taking people through and doing tours and stuff. And
nice.
Mate, he said that's actually going to be one of the biggest events on the calendar too. So too many good things. But anyway, as exciting as it is to get wildly off topic, we're here today to talk about you, my friend, and find out how on earth you came to be standing in Goodwood with Mad Mike, having recently done some things with another Formula One champion, and we'll loop back around to that. But mate, a boy from Perth, Western Australia. Take me back, young man, in WA, mate. How does this story start?
Yeah, born and bred WA. Didn't have a choice in that one.
No.
Dad and Mum just met over there. Dad was a professional motocross rider back in the day. One of the first guys sponsored by Honda in Australia, actually, in motocross. Got given a couple of old Elsinores, 125 and 250 back in the day, and used to race. And he used to do all right, and then decided to start a stunt team with his mates, and they created the first ever sort of, as far as they're aware, first ever Australian motocross stunt team. And he used to do all the halftime entertainment at the speedways and all those sorts of things back in the day when that was super popular, sprint cars and all that sort of thing. And then, him and Mum always made sure we were amongst sport as much as we possibly can. So I grew up around it, and grew up riding bikes and watching supercars and everything four wheel, and just had this infatuation for wanting to be involved in sport. I was a bit big for motorsport myself. I'm 6'4", so and I was 6 foot at 12 years old, so I wasn't really going to probably be in cars or bikes. And I didn't really know how to use brakes, so that wasn't it. So focused my attention on the sports management side of things rather than, managing athletes and events and projects within sports rather than trying to be an athlete.
Mate, that's wild. I can't believe it's a family tradition that your old boy was hard into it. That's wicked.
Yeah, he's really cool, really cool. Always been an inspiration for me, and bit of a legend of the old motocross days in the 70s when people didn't realise what motocross was most of the time.
Absolutely, that's ahead of its time, and with Honda as well.
It was early. It was like one of the first times I actually started sponsoring people. It was when sponsorship first started, and he was pre the Jeff Leesks and those guys that really went big time and international. He was sort of in that 70s era where it was, getting a free bike, you were doing pretty well there.
Oh, you'd be stoked. That is a wonderful story. And so you would have spent a lot of time on the road as well. So that was sort of the family business. When you were a young bloke, was that still the thing?
He wrapped up racing sort of late 70s, early 80s. I was born 84. I'm 40 next year. We didn't used to tour too much with him. But when I was younger, he was still doing a bit of his stunt riding stuff. But he wrapped that up after my brother came along in about 87, and then we just rode for fun after that.
Yeah, okay. So you missed the shenanigans, but you heard the stories.
Correct. Yeah, still got the old black and white footage for it all, so it's good.
Oh, really? Mate, is there much of that on the internet? Is there much of that kicking around?
We haven't put too much up. We've got a few photo reels floating around which we could dig out. But he tends to. He's a bit of a modest, humble old boy. So I pull out the photo books and the old newspaper clippings every now and then for a bit of nostalgic.
Absolutely, that's a wild story. And mate, growing up in WA, so you grew up in Perth?
I did, yeah. Grew up in Perth, lived there through till, basically the whole life besides moving to New Zealand for a few years.
Yeah, right. And, mate, school, was that for you or not really?
School was a funny one. So I chose not to do it was in WA at the time, it was TE, HEC, the exam sort of things. I focused on doing the one where you don't have to do exams, don't have to study, and you just run amok and you go do work experience instead. But I kind of rigged the system. So I knew I wanted to work in sports management instead of getting placed into some work experience I didn't want to do. I'd called up all the sporting franchises like the West Coast Eagles and the Perth Heat, the baseball team, and the Perth Wildcats and those sorts of things, and said, hey, can I come and do work experience there? And then got them to sign some forms, gave them to my teachers so that whenever I was going to work experience, I was actually going to cool places where I wanted to be. And got out of school, did 6 months in TAFE that I didn't want to do, just to basically get the mature student entry 6 months later, and then smashed out my uni degree in sports management and marketing.
Mate, that is a good story.
I just wanted to, sound silly because you can't really party, but I just wanted to enjoy the back end of high school and not do exams and actually just get my foot in the door and in from a work sense. And felt, why would I study hard while I'm 15, 16, 17, do all these exams, put all this stress on myself when I could just cruise, do 6 months of TAFE and then get into uni anyway. That's the only reason I was doing exams.
Were your folks supportive of that approach, or were they a bit confused by that?
My dad always wanted me to be a tradie. He was thought I'd never make any money in sports management. Why the hell do you want to do that? He and my brother are draftees, and always felt, always felt like the blue collar was the way to make money over in Western Australia. My mum was always really supportive. She was like, she knew I knew what I wanted to do at 13, so I wanted to do work in sports management. That's it. That's what I'm doing, and that's how I'm going to get there. And that was it. So yeah, always supportive, but was a little bit of a curveball for in terms of route.
Yeah, can imagine, because that's fair shenanigans for a fellow that age, and like that's quite a that's a broad understanding of how things work pretty early on. To have sort of mapped those things out and gone, righto, I see what's going on here. What drew you? Because you said 13. You went, I want to do sports management. Like, what happened, mate? You watched Jerry Maguire and show me the money. Like, how on earth did that come together?
Yeah, it was a mixture of things. I had an uncle who ran sports side of things at a university in Western Australia, so that his sort of work always looked really intriguing to me. He was always working around sports and events in sport and traveling to Canada and taking people on sports trips and all that sort of thing. So he's watching his lifestyle. I really aspired to. I was pretty good at basketball when I was younger, but I knew I was never going to be a pro. So I always had this mentality of, well, if I can't play for the team, I want to run the team. So that kind of was the thought process I had there. And I followed the NBA a lot back then, and used to just sort of see the money that sort of swirled around in the sport over there in the management and ownership world of the sport. And I just thought, well, if I can be around it and work in it and still get to enjoy the highs and lows of sport, but not actually put my body through it, then that'd be quite interesting. And just set my eyes on that and went for it.
It's bloody good, mate. Where did you study sport management? Where did that?
Studied at Edith Cowan University, ECU, which not many people have heard of. It's just a little WA university, but Edith Cowan is she's the beautiful woman on the $50 note. You didn't know that?
Really? On the old pineapple?
She's the first ever woman in Australian Parliament.
Right.
Yeah.
Mate, I have learned something new for today. Thank you for that. And you went to the university from so Edith Cowan on the pineapple. Who would have thought? the dots we connect here on this show. I mean, this is real learning going on here. You've gone to university. You punched out the degree. That was 3 years.
Yeah, it was just over 3 years, because halfway through my degree, I got offered a full-time job at the university running the university sport program for students. So I had an office on campus. Dropped my study back to 2 or 3 units a semester for the last sort of 2 years, dragged it out an extra year, but got to work full time at the university I was studying at, which was quite cool.
How bloody good's that? And how did that line up? Had you sort of involved yourself fairly heavily in all these things and just kept turning up? And
yeah, pretty much. I was one of those sort of like professional pesterers. I just didn't let anything interesting happen without me being part of it, whether I was getting paid or volunteering or just around it. Always just made sure I was involved in some shape or form. And, in those sort of, I guess, spaces back in the early 2000s, they were always up for an extra set of hands. And I tend to think I was pretty capable and trustworthy, so I got thrown a bone a bit more than usual.
So that's bloody good, mate. Hang around the barbershop long enough, you're bound to get a haircut, as they say in the classics. Mate, you were there for how long? Because you ended up with a pretty big team there, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was at ECU for about 3 years. Took a whole range of students. One of the funnest ones, I took 200 university students to the Australian University Games on the Gold Coast. I'm not sure how I was trusted with that sort of group when I was only like 23, but that was quite fun. I got a tap on the shoulder to head across to UWA, which is the University of Western Australia, and head up their sport and recreation centre over there. Had about 50 staff across all the different sort of facilities and competitions that sort of fell under the umbrella there. And if you're from WA, you know that ECU and UWA have a bit of a rivalry. So having, for all the UWA students that work there, having an ECU student as a boss, former student, graduate, was quite fun for them. But it was a big jump for me. 23, managing 50 people, a lot of them older than me.
Massive. Because that is a lot of responsibility for a young bloke, and despite the experience that you've got, like that is still there's a lot of worldly experience required for those things. Whereas I guess youthful exuberance does go a long way. You can solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But that's a hell of a thing, ending up in that position at that age.
Yeah, I was thrown a lot of responsibility. It really taught me communication, that's for sure.
I bet it did.
And I think, yeah, it was good because it was the university had a lot of traditional style, so there was a lot of stuff set in stone. But it also gave me the ability to sort of learn and grow in a framework that was quite a safe environment to, I guess, make those little mistakes that you do when you're a professional in the younger years, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not as catastrophic in terms of a PR disaster compared to the sorts of things you find yourself sailing around these days. There's probably just a fraction of wiggle room.
Yeah. And I think what helped is coming from another university sport department. So it was kind of, I knew that university sports sector quite well, even though I was still quite young.
And this is where I think your story gets particularly interesting, is you sort of spotted two paths where you'd found somewhere that you could apply your trade, but you also knew that there are other opportunities out there that probably had a little bit more razzle-dazzle to them.
Yeah. I sort of got to my end of my time not end of my time. I was only a couple of years into UWA, and I kind of was staring down the barrel of, do I stick with this traditional sports route where, I sort of put the International Olympic Committee, I guess you'd say, on a pedestal to sort of where my, mainstream sport sort of its trajectory was looking. And then I had things like the Red Bull Air Race was in Perth every other year throughout those sort of late to mid 2000s, 2010, 2012. And I was like, I really want to work for that brand. They are the most creative, interesting, like boundary pushing brand I've ever seen. And I couldn't get my head around not working for them. So I pushed hard and was always keeping an eye out for jobs they had going, and applied for a couple, and ended up mincing it with them.
And that story, I'd love to, I guess, dig into a little bit of how that actually happened, because they didn't just go, Mr. University Sport, that's exactly what we're looking for here. Can you unpack how you got yourself in the door?
Yeah, sure. The short version is I went for a job with them, and I got down to the final two. And I was interviewing with the head of marketing for Red Bull Australia, and it came down between me and another person, and she'd done that exact role for Red Bull in Ireland already. And the marketing director called me and said, "I'm so sorry, like I want to hire you, and I'd hire you in a heartbeat, but I've got this person who's done the job for Red Bull in another country already, and she really wants to move to Australia. So I have to go with her just because I know she's proven and this, that, and the other." And the role was based in Sydney, but he said, "Look, hey, we're coming over to." The air race is coming to Perth in about 6 weeks' time. I'll throw you a couple of VIP tickets. Like, you can come along. And these tickets, I think, they're worth about $1,500 a person or something back in the day. He says, "Please come and enjoy the hospitality with me." And he was quite a traditional German guy. And I said, "Oh, thanks very much." And I got off the phone and I was gutted, absolutely gutted. And I thought about it. I called him back the next day and I said, "Hey, thanks for your offer for the tickets, but I don't want them. You can keep them." And he was like German, like I said, traditional, highly offended that I was sort of almost like disrespecting him. I said, nah. And I kind of bluffed a little bit. I said, "I've taken 2 weeks annual leave for my full-time job. I want to come and work on the Red Bull Air Race with you, show you what I can do. And I'm going to work for you for free. And all I ask for is you give me a role with some responsibility." And he was like, "You serious?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I said, "Yep." So he goes, "All right, give me a week." Hung up the phone, called me back a week later and said, "Right, you're head of on-premise activations for the week and our VIP rollout under the local on-premise team. We'll see you there."
Yikes.
So yeah, I ended up working. I only ended up taking like a week off, but I probably did, I don't know how many hours. And we got to the after party, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I heard you did a really good job. How many hours you do?" And I said, "I don't know. But thank you." And he said, "No, how many hours you do?" I said, "I honestly don't know. It was heaps." He goes, "Well, send me an invoice for 80 hours and we'll sort it out." And I said, "Mate, I didn't do it for the money." He's like, "I know, but I want to pay you because you did such a good job." And at this point, I didn't even know how to do an invoice. I knew how to do it. Invoice, and he didn't even give me an hourly rate, so I had to kind of guess what I thought was reasonable. And he said, "And keep your phone on." And then a month after that, I got a phone call from the guys at Red Bull and said, "Hey, we've got a job for you in WA, in Perth." It's called a musketeer.
A
I said, what the hell's a
musketeer.
musketeer?
Yeah.
And basically, it's an on-premise salesperson, looks after all the pubs, clubs, festivals, and events, and
Right.
yeah, looking after that within WA. And I had a great mentor there by the name of Kimmy, and she, I said, yep, all right, well, I'll jump ship from what's a pretty good trajectory in university sport to get my foot in the door at Red Bull. I said, all I ask for is every opportunity in sport possible while I'm in the brand. She said, you hit your targets, I'll get you opportunities. So I was hitting sales targets and going to get my fingers dirty on as many sports things as I could.
That's amazing. So they got you in right at the ground floor. Did you find out later if that was on purpose, that they thought, they'll get you to know the business from the bottom up?
It was interesting. So I think their sales roles are traditionally enticing because of the brand, but they're a tough role.
Oh, bloody bet.
Yeah, so they didn't get me in because they're like, we really want that guy in sports in the future. And they got me in because they thought I've got a good hustle mentality. I've got thing, and that I'm committed, and I'm a good learner and that sort of thing. But I don't think they were ready for how hard I would go at hitting my targets, so I could get all the sports opportunities.
Yeah.
Like just little things, like I would take annual leave in that job at Red Bull and fly myself over to Sydney to be a volunteer at a Red Bull event at Red Bull X-Fighters in the sports team. So I was like taking annual leave from my home the business I was working for, to then go and work on events for them for free.
Yeah, that does tend to catch people by surprise, that sort of attitude. That's not something that they'd see every day. And just, if you wouldn't mind briefly explaining to me, so the job that you had to do, like your pubs and clubs and stuff, like how does that work? I thought that'd be a fairly natural thing that people would want in their premise, but that is actually a bit of work.
Yeah, it's a huge role actually. It's a really important. Red Bull's only one product, still privately owned, so sales driving mentality is really strong. Red Bull was first launched as a product on premise. So the first time it was ever sold in Austria was in a pub, like in a bar. And that whenever they launch into a new country, well, they have in most countries now, they start at the pub and club level. So serving with alcohol, and then it goes out into the off premise. Or the supermarkets and that sort of thing. So yeah, you're responsible for just making sure that the product's front and center. It's quite an impulsive product when people see other people ordering vodka Red Bulls or Jaeger bombs or getting a boat filled with a bottle of vodka and table service. It's quite impulsive. Everyone's like, oh, actually, I really want one of those. So it's just about being front and center and making sure you're in the industry, and all the bar managers and pubs and clubs and festivals are stocking it, and you're just getting as many sales as you can, getting as many cans in hand, and having a good time on the way.
That is a wonderful way to learn the business, though, isn't it? To understand that is the trade, that all these shenanigans that go on and all the things that happen at a higher level, all those activations, the goal is to obviously, move the product.
Correct.
Because as fun as it all looks, it is still a business, and you do have to commercialise all these activities.
Correct. Yeah. And Red Bull's just one of those ones which they have fun no matter where you're doing it. So they didn't feel like sales to me. Like it felt like just a really fun way of being around the product. They used to do these thing called night calls where they would, one of your work days, you'd start at 2:00 in the afternoon and finish at midnight. And your role was to go out in trade, go to all the bars, in a certain area, and buy a vodka Red Bull from them, check that they're serving it right, check that it's supplied right, actually meet with the bartenders that are serving it and the owners of the pub, and be seen in their venues at night, so you actually understand the crowd and how they act, so you can best service them. But that always set me apart, because it was, when you're in there and you're meeting with the bar owners, they don't just see you for a meeting at 9:00 on a Monday. They actually see you in your bar socialising and being, and playing with their staff in terms of, giving them incentives and encouragement and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
And it makes a difference because, again, people recognise the effort, because there is some laziness in the sorts of jobs where, you've got to go and see a lot of people, and a lot of that does feel too hard. And I've certainly seen it myself. So somebody that jumps in with a bit of enthusiasm and is there just going, yeah, buddy, and enjoying it, like enjoying the job. You're stoked to be there, stoked to have a good time, stoked to talk to them. That resonates with people, and they remember that. And
Definitely.
That little bit of extra effort. Now, something I did skip over, because I've got a few things, because we've got so much to talk about. But mate, around this time, you also managed to help a fella that was having a real bad day.
Yeah, well, this was
Yeah,
just pre-Red Bull, but
far
yeah,
out,
when I was
yeah.
at UWA,
Yeah.
you're talking about the heart attack incident.
I am, mate. Yeah, shine a bit of light on that one for me.
Yeah, so I was at University of West Australia managing Sport and Rec Centre, and I just was sitting in the office. Sort of, someone came running down, sort of screaming from the squash courts, and there was someone's having a heart attack. And only about 2 months before that, we'd just purchased a bunch of defibrillators and had some training on how to use them. And so I just grabbed it, ran up there, and yeah, there's a guy, a fella who was probably only, I think he was early 50s, having a heart attack, and I just went through didn't think anything of it, just went through the motion, cut his shirt off, wiped all the sweat off, and attached the pads. And the hardest thing to do was to actually get his mates off him, stop touching him, to stop doing the resus, to let the machine actually read his whether he had a heartbeat or a pulse or anything like that, and he didn't. And it gave him 2 zaps and brought him back to life.
Bloody hell.
So that was pretty special, and yeah, there was the media grabbed hold of it, wrote a few articles about it, and that sort of thing. And it was a few days later. This young fella walked through. He would have been about my age now, I reckon, probably late 30s, with a carton Corona on his shoulder, and I was about to tell him off for bringing liquor into the sports centre. And he goes, "Hey mate, you saved my dad's life the other day. No thanks will ever be enough, but this will have to do." And dropped a carton of Corona on the desk. So
Wow.
that was quite an interesting moment.
Fuck, mate, what a life of a young man. It's mate, I'm pleased to say I've never had to use one of those. I have done the training on them, and yeah, mate.
Yeah, it's funny. It was at the time I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think there's someone dead in front of me, and if this doesn't work, it's gone. I just thought, oh yeah, cool. I learned this the other day. I just attach it, and I stayed completely calm. His mates, like, I literally had to basically restrain a guy who was half my size with all my strength to like stop him from touching him, to let this thing read him. And it wasn't until later that I had a bit of an adrenaline rush in terms of what actually happened and realization. But yeah, it was. I'm just glad it worked.
Mate, tell me about it. That's that's a wild one. Now, what I really enjoy through your story here, and mate, yours is a banger. So you've got yourself in the door at Red Bull. You are working your ring out. You're taking holidays to go and work a bit more for them, and desperately just tapping on that door going, "Sport, what can you do? What can you do? What can you do? What can you do?" And just earning your stripes and reminding them that you want to be a part of that. And then there was a little thing that happened with a bloke in Perth.
Yeah. So while I was in the sales role, and I was, like you said, tapping on the shoulder of the sports team, I said, anything you can do. The good thing with Australia is it's really big, right? And the head office for Red Bull is over on the East Coast. So any of the athletes that were sort of South Australia and West Coast that were sponsored by them, I just basically pseudo looked after, and they needed product, or they needed something dropped off or delivered, or they were having a party and wanted the event vehicle, DJ truck there or something like that, or they were at an event, or there was other athletes that were traveling over there for projects or anything. I just sort of helped them out. And so I got to meet guys like Josh Sheehan, a freestyle motocross rider, really well, and looked after him. And then I got a call one day from the head of sport, a guy named Simon Barrett, and he said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this, but the Toro Rosso team, the Alpha Tori back in the day, has just signed a kid from Perth by the name of Dan Ricciardo." And I knew of Dan. He grew up in the suburb next to me, but never met him before. And we want to throw him a welcome to Red Bull party. So he gave me a budget and said, "Can you go catch up with him and throw him a good party?" Because I was looking after all the pubs and clubs and festivals at the time. So yeah, here's his number. So I give Dan a call. "Hey buddy, how you going? BT here. I live in the suburb over from I think where you grew up. I know your stepbrother actually. And hey, congratulations, welcome to Red Bull." He's like, "Yeah, rad." I was like, "Look, I want to throw you a party. What do you want?" He goes, "Oh, well, I'm a really mellow dude." And he, there's a cool bar in Subiaco called Pearl Bar at the time. And he goes, "I'd love to just have some friends and family there." He goes, "To be honest, I haven't got that many mates, but I got heaps of family because I'm a I'm a wog boy, so I got heaps of family. So we just got to make sure we got plenty of room for them." So I said, "Yeah, no probs." And he goes, "Oh, I just want this real good DJ too." So we put on a wicked DJ and threw a party for Dan Ricciardo on a random, I think it was Thursday night in Perth, and the rest is history.
Far out. And it's these sorts of things as well. And at the time, that's just part of the job. You do the thing. But, he's there becoming one of the absolute superstars of the sport. Now, would you believe, I think I've also just kicked my internet connection here, so I may have just lost you for a second. Mate, have I got you back there?
Got me, mate?
Yeah, do you know what I just did? You know that cable that I was so proud of that I told you I plug in, I hardwire for these? I just banged the cable like an idiot. Mate, that would have been a good one. So the Danny Rick job, getting that off the ground, did that finally open the door to sport, or did you have to wait a bit longer?
I waited a little bit longer. I had the general manager or the managing director of Red Bull Australia. He was a very active, with staff, and he came over to WA for his usual sort of half yearly visit, and he normally does a day or two in trade with some of the staff, and he came out for half a day in trade with me. And most people take him on the milk run. They take him to their best locations, their best bars with all their things. Oh, look how good I do this. I took the opposite approach. I took him to all my shittest ones, all the ones that like I was really struggling to get things done, or that sort of. And I tried to sort of leverage having him with me to get stuff across the line. And he really respected that and rated it. And it kind of he'd heard what I've been doing with sport and all that sort of thing. And it got to the end of the day, and he said, "Hey, you want to be in sport. What would you prefer? Would you prefer athlete manager based in Sydney or head of sport in New Zealand?" And I was like, "Are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah." He said, "I've got both roles coming up." And and I said, "Well, which one would you take?" And he said, "Well, athlete manager in Sydney would be great. You'll be under the head of sport. You'll have a great athlete environment. You'll still be in Australia. You'll get to do a lot of really interesting things and pivot that way. Or you could just take the big jump, do the head of sport role in a country you've never been to, and understand whether your skills are internationally transferable or not. Smaller country, obviously, but a really interesting, country when it comes to the sports dynamic and the athlete portfolio." And I said, "You know what? Give me New Zealand." Now, he didn't just give it to me. I still had to go through like a 3-month interview process and convince the Kiwi team that hiring an Aussie for their head of sport was the right thing to do. And managed to make that happen and moved over at the end of 2011.
Because I have to imagine that would have taken some convincing as well. I would hazard a guess that there were a few people in NZ that saw themselves hurtling towards that role as well. So to bring an Aussie in as well,
Yeah.
Good.
Well, what was interesting was the head of sport from New Zealand was being promoted to the head of sport in Australia.
Right.
And he was a fantastic guy, still a great friend now, a guy by the name of Ivan Menem. But the Kiwi team, they hadn't had an Aussie work in their team before. There was at the time it was a really small team. There was only one other person that worked in the sports department. Then he had his island role, but
I'll bet.
probably didn't quite have the same level of experience that I had. So managed to just nip, I guess, a few other people. And I think it helped being internal at Red Bull technically. So although I was coming from a sales background, I still knew the brand pretty well. Most of the more experienced sports management people in New Zealand didn't have the brand experience that I had. So.
And that would make it harder if you didn't have that, because you could hit the ground running on that part and you didn't have to go through the training, I guess.
Yeah, and I had such a deep experience with the Red Bull events in Australia, even though I wasn't working in the sports team. I'd worked on every sport event there was, and worked with athletes. So I had real life experience within the last 2 years within the brand in sports because I'd forced it.
Yeah, all those volunteer hours that you'd racked up just paid for themselves in that moment. The other thing there that I just wanted to double back to was taking the big cheese to all the places that you're struggling with, because that's something that, again, I certainly wouldn't hear. Because people do. They show, look at the wonderful things I'm doing, because people would only want to, and those things over there just... That's an interesting approach. Was that just something that you just went, you know what, fuck it, I'll just show him and see if he can, Again, talk me through the thinking. This is 180 degrees the other direction. I love it.
A while ago now. I put a lot of my decision making back then to. I used to love taking risks, and I'd really push the limits with everything I do, and I used to do that professionally as well. And I had a really good mentor, my manager at the time, by the name of Kim. She was a weapon, and I said to her, "I'm thinking about doing this. What do you reckon?" She goes, "Yep, that's a great idea, but you better nail them, because if you don't go into those ones, and you don't nail them, then you're going to look worse off. So you're taking a bigger risk by taking that approach, but the reward's bigger. So I put a bit more pressure on myself, but I did. Yeah, it worked out all right.
I was just fascinated by
I
it.
recommend it to a lot of
Yeah.
the talent that I've mentored and that over the years. I always say, tell me what you're struggling with, and let's find a way to help it. Use those skilled people around you that have the experience to get you through those tough ones, and because it makes everybody feel good if you do get that win. You know.
Well, it does, and this is the sort of mentoring and management that I certainly in the years that I've floated around sport that I haven't seen a lot of this sort of chat, and it's admirable. And that's the thing. I'm not sitting here trying to blow smoke up your ass. I think that is a really wonderful way because you're looking rather than ignoring the challenges. You're actually looking at it and going, look, how can we just go head first into this and see if we can make it better? Which is again not always the way if you're sort of looking for easy wins, and because that is not an easy win.
Nah. Well, I mean, Red Bull's a really high performing business, a lot of high performing people in it. You really got to stand out there to make your mark on it. I think at the time there was only 60 head of sport roles in the world.
Oh wow!
So like there was only about 60 odd countries that actually had a head of sport. There was a few more. Red Bull was in about 100 countries at that point, but a lot of them were smaller and only had athlete managers or event managers or that sort of thing. So. I really needed to sort of set myself apart, and I don't know. I took every tactic I could to do that in every opportunity.
Okay, so the high performance environment that they, I guess, had cultivated just really helped you to notch it up as well because you looked around and you went, "What a bunch of weapons! If I'm going to stand out, mate, I've got to go 10/10ths and then a little bit more."
Yeah. I don't think I ever looked at a clock when I worked at Red Bull. Like I never counted an hour. I never, and all the people that I looked up to in the business did the same thing. It wasn't necessarily like if you were there during business hours, it was just what you were getting done with your time. And all the weapons just got a lot done. And Jason Sargent was the managing director at the time. He's head of quarter of the world. He's one of the head coaches for Red Bull globally now, and a fantastic human, and been a mentor of mine for a long time.
Because it certainly sounds like they've learned. I mean, again, they're a brand. How could you not learn things when you look at what they do globally? But in terms of what they've cultivated internally, that's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, they've fantastic culture internally. What I loved about the brand most was they focused on people's strengths, not weaknesses. A lot of businesses and brands, they'll go, all right, let's find out what you're weakest at. Let's train you in that. Red Bull would do the opposite. Like, what are you most strongest at? Let's give you more in that area. And that was something that just excited me because, you can really, really make it your own. And I think everyone's more motivated to work harder and stronger and do more and better when you're doing something you love and you're good at.
And it makes a lot of sense. And as I listen to these things, in particular, the crossover of skills into self-managed business, because that's the attitude. You don't do more of the stuff you're no good at. You give everything into what you're good at, and you don't worry about how much you put into it because it's irrelevant. You just get it done because that's just what it asks for. And it's interesting listening to that because, again, this is not corporate culture that I am familiar with. This feels like an alternate universe here.
Yeah, and Red Bull's definitely not that typical corporate, that's for sure.
God, they're really not. And even over the years, I think what's most impressive is the fact that it's been at it for a while now and that it hasn't gone down that path where a lot of companies start out as, I'm an innovator, and then, that is something that you see, and you see a lot of it in tech and those sorts of places as well, where they then become victim of their own success. But it strikes me as somebody on the outside looking in that they've stayed very true to form, and listening to the things that you're telling me here, it all actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I still, even in my with my sports agency space collective at the moment, I contract back to Red Bull, still running events for them, and the culture in that sense is still really, really strong. And I love seeing the younger versions of me coming through as athlete specialist managers and all having a crack and learning the ropes and focusing on their strengths, And it's interesting watching them all go through it because I wouldn't have done that because that's not one of my strengths. But my gosh, you're good at it. I love seeing you work that way.
And see, that's really cool. And that mentoring back, because you've said that more than once that there've been a number of people that have offered you that guidance and support. Again, things that I find don't really exist. Or very hard to find, or the sorts of people that want to give you their advice, you sort of go, oh, do I really want to be listening to you? There's a fair bit of that, because if they're not running rings around you. Now, mate, in my little notes here, we roll on to the time that you met the big cheese, Mr. Dietrich.
Yeah, Dietrich Matterschultz, the owner of Red Bull, the late owner of Red Bull, passed away last year, I believe. Yeah, that was a really interesting one, actually. So the joys of being head of sport at Red Bull is once a year you get flown up to Austria to basically present your plan for the next calendar year. And you get a really vigorous onboarding as well when you come head of sport. So when I first joined, it was early 2012, got a trip up to Austria, which is where their home base is in Salzburg there, and was doing an onboarding with about another 5 other head of sport who had just joined within the last 3 months. And we got to meet the owner of Red Bull, Dietrich. He came and introduced himself, and we got to ask him a couple of questions and that sort of thing. And he was just such a humble gentleman. And at this point, what was he? He was about to, what was he? Just this was 2012, and everyone was asking him lots of different questions, and I just said, oh, hey, Brennan here, after the sports down in New Zealand, keen to understand what you think of the country and the sports program down there. And he turned to his little EA and he goes, oh, I love New Zealand, and I actually tried to buy some property there once and had a bit of a giggle and moved on. He said, no, I love the place, I love everything about it, the action, the adventure, the adrenaline, the whole place just speaks to what Red Bull's all about, and look forward to seeing what you do with it. I said, oh, that's awesome. And at the time, Red Bull New Zealand had a house in Queenstown, which was used for athletes and events and that sort of thing. And I said, I've got the keys to a house in Queenstown. Actually, I've got the keys to your place in Queenstown. If you ever want to use it, make sure you come down and let me know. And he goes, yeah, sure, no worries. And then I got back to New Zealand. I said to my boss at the time, I said, hey, Dietrich said something about trying to buy some property in New Zealand. What was he talking about there? And he rolled his eyes and he said, yeah, he tried to buy Queenstown. I said, what do you mean? He goes, he actually tried to buy Queenstown, like the whole place. Because he visited there and he thought it just embodied everything that Red Bull was about. And he genuinely got the managing director of Red Bull New Zealand at that point, Gavin, to go and have a chat with the mayor and find out whether he could genuinely buy the whole town. And obviously it wasn't for sale. That's not how Australia and New Zealand work. They said, look, you can buy some property out of town and you can buy some businesses, but you can't actually buy the whole town. He wanted to buy it from Red Bull.
Because it is like a little slice of Europe there. When you fly in to Queenstown, it's astonishing. I mean, it is just an incredible place. I totally get where he's coming from there. And look, good on him. I mean, imagine having the capacity to even float that conversation. What a brilliant thing to do.
It was a good story. And funnily enough, he ended up buying an island, just like one of the Fijian islands next door to, I believe, Richard Branson's island. Somewhere up there in the water, he got a little island. And I got to learn a little bit about that later on down the track when a glass submarine rocked up to New Zealand Customs, and I had to go and supervise the quarantine guys to look over it because the Fijians didn't have the right level of quarantine jurisdiction. So anyway, that's another story.
You'd get some very weird phone calls, it strikes me. Now, you also had there's a little note here about a chrome aeroplane.
That was Dietrich. So anyone who's familiar with Red Bull knows that he's got a couple of hangars in Austria. Hangar 7, which is the one that has all these operational planes and automobiles that every Red Bull vehicle that's basically ever run, he's got one of up there. When we're up there as part of the onboarding, let's go out to Hangar 7 for an experience. And happened to be a day that I was taking one of his old, like these custom beautiful, I can't even remember the name of the plane, but it was this chrome, basically private jet with all these big Chesterfield swivel chairs in it. And we jumped on it and went for a lap around Salzburg, like we were we felt like we were old school. I don't know, F1 drivers, I guess. But yeah, got a lap around that. Apparently, it was owned by an old Arab dictator who went under and got repossessed and sold on. And yeah, he picked it up. It's quite cool.
Fantastic, mate. There's some great stories in here, aren't there? Now, you get that out of the way. You've got yourself organised back in NZ, mate. Red Bull, Conquer the Crown. Take me back in time. The year, what's that? 2012, give or take.
Yeah. Good year, that one.
Yeah, and you and a bloke named Mike thought you might go and do some skids in the hills, and then what you didn't probably realise at the time was you were inspiring most of the planet who enjoyed automotive drifting or making style of videos, because that exercise, to this day, in my most humble of opinion, is one of the most sensational things made. It just is. It's a banger that other bangers are measured by. I would love to know a little bit more about this story.
Yeah, that was a really fun project. So I guess as an Aussie rolling into New Zealand, I inherited the athlete program that was already here, and one of those athletes was Mike Whiddett, and I just loved everything about him and his style. And when I didn't know much about drift before I moved to New Zealand, but he taught me very quickly a lot about it. And I was down in Queenstown. I was running a high performance camp for Red Bull in the snow, which is another story again, because I'd never seen snow before, and all of a sudden I was running a high performance camp in Queenstown. But I was driving to Snow Park, which is a beautiful snow place just over the Crown Range, and I'd go up this road, and I was like, oh my God, I felt like I was in a video game, just going around all these switchback corners at the bottom, and then through this escaping sort of like plateau, and then up the side of the next section. And I got to the top, and I called Mike, and I said, Mike, have you ever driven this road called the Crown Range before? And he goes, nah. And I said, man, Google it, check it out. Like, it's unreal. I think you need to drift this, eh? And then by the time I drove down the other side of it, got to the Cadrona Hotel, pulled in there. Mike called me back and was like, man, I just Googled it. That place looks unreal. Do you reckon we could? And I said, I don't know, leave it with me. So I talked to a couple of people down there, got a few connections, managed to find the number for the mayor of Queenstown. And I gave her a call and said, hey, do you reckon we could grab a coffee? I've got an idea for you. And she said, yeah, sure. I don't think she really knew what she was in for. But I sat her down and I said, look, got this idea. We've got a world-class, I called him precision driver at the time, who would love to drive your beautiful road. Now, this is what people are going to think of it. This is what it's actually going to be. And this is what the output's going to be. And basically, we just want to show how wonderful this country is and how highly skilled Kiwis are. And she said, I love it. This is what Queenstown is all about, and adrenaline and action and adventure. And she goes, can I have a seat in the car? I said,
mate.
And I said, yeah, her name was Vanessa. And I said, sure thing, Vanessa, we'll make it happen. And yeah, the stars just aligned on that one. It was a really unique one. Yeah, it was. I can't remember how many corners. We had to do it. We only had it for one day. We couldn't close the whole road. We had to close it in sections for 5 minutes at a time. Mike's tyres wouldn't last the whole thing anyway, so we did 8 runs on the bottom section, 7 runs on the middle section, and then 6 runs on the top section. And I'm trying to remember the numbers, but we had about 40 traffic management people hidden in camo outfits down every driveway, nook and cranny, so no cars or animals would come out. We had Cineflex cameras on helicopters and phantom cams tucked in the bushes on certain sections. And yeah, we managed to. It sounds like high budget, but we actually did it on a shoestring and pulled it all together and threw it out to the world. And back in early 2013, I think it was 10 years ago. It got like 1 million views in a day, 2 million in a week, which back then they were huge numbers.
Oh, insane.
Yeah, between that and drift shifters, it took Mike from, can't remember his name, I think it was about 100,000 followers to 1 million followers in about a month.
Okay, so that video specifically was actually fairly instrumental in his global launch.
Yeah, look, Mike has been doing incredible things for a long time before that, but that one it hit virality. It really just went to another level. And I think it was just the way we shot it. It was just done quite raw, and it was quite real. And Mike's rotors just have a whole other sound, and his skill was next level. And we had a couple of just, there's those moments in certain projects where they come etched in your mind, and that slow motion of him coming around the corner, shooting a flame, and the helicopter just peering up from the valley behind him.
Man, I got chills, because what's funny is when I think of that actual clip, that's the moment where the heli, because I think you guys shot that high frame rate, and then your audio engineers, it's coming up and it's and you're just there going, oh God, this is the sickest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I just want to watch this forever. Like, I've gone and driven that road, and more recently as well, specifically because I saw Mad Mike ripping that, and I'm like, oh my God, I've just got to, I've got my wife and my child in the car, so it's not quite as hectic. But going up that and imagining that and then seeing the chopper coming over, because you were shooting, as you said, you had Phantom Flex, Centerflex. I think you guys did a lot of stuff on Red Epics. Like, you were using the best available gear on the planet. And I was working my way into the Red ecosystem at that time, and that was the sort of stuff that they were showing us. They were going, these are the things that's possible with what we do, and the footage that you guys were producing as part of Red Bull Media House
it was
the stuff that came back.
It was a crazy little project, because it was, it's the highest tar sealed road in New Zealand. Everybody thought it couldn't be done, couldn't close the road, couldn't do this. I've always had this approach of just no, and this is going to sound dodgy, but no is a great motivator for me. And whenever I get a no, I say why, how is kind of the approach I take. And I called 3 people. I called the person who's in charge of all filming for the whole region, and they've done a lot of big movies, Lord of the Rings and all that sort of stuff down in those regions. So they knew how to get things done down there. And I was always inspired by the Kiwi mentality. Everyone was just all about it,
getting it done.
We did all the little things, you notify all the residents really, really well. We had wings teams like the Red Bull Minis at each end, so that when we stopped the road, they would go along, give everyone some Red Bull cans, give them a magazine,
Cool.
Give them a high five. Hey, we're going to close for 5 minutes. We'd follow the cars that were already going up and down. And then as soon as they were done, radio through, might go, boom, he would cut. He would actually crank through. And then as soon as he'd get to the lock, he'd swing around and he'd drive back down in front of all the cars. And half the cars would pull over where he would and get a quick photo or an autograph or whatever at the time, and half of them didn't even know him, but they knew that something special was happening. They thought they were going to be in a James Bond movie or something.
Mate, that is so cool. And I couldn't believe that when I'm going through, your little CV, and I'm like, get out of town. To be speaking to somebody that was there and instrumental in bringing that together, to the fact that, you called the mayor and you're like, I got this dumb idea. I love that. Like, I love that.
She was awesome. And we did end up putting her in the car.
Did you?
And we actually did a separate edit of the project where we put GoPros in the car and we subbed out the little sections of it and put in shots of her. And we gave her a copy and said, this is the end release. We're going to be putting it on, viral tomorrow. And she watched it and saw herself in it. She goes, oh my God, you're not going to put that on YouTube. And we were like, no, that's just a special version for you. And Mike signed a helmet, left it on her desk. From what I understand, it was there for the rest of her mayorship, I guess you'd say. And
that's
those are the sort of those projects. Just they make it all worthwhile. And that's another one of those ones. Red Bull just enabling people's dreams to happen. And Mike's gone and conquered many more incredible hills and events and projects since then.
Well, that's the thing is, I look at Mike, and I know many athletes do as well, is he's the blueprint for success. That's what people look to if they're looking to build their career as a global athlete. And Mike's attitude of entertainment first, I think that is one of the very best things that he brings to the sport, is that he is an entertainer first and foremost. And I think that is something that people always need to remember, particularly in sports, is obviously it's important to win and be the best and all these things. But there is a lot to be said for the personality, the entertainment, and remembering that that's what people are there for. They're there for a show, no matter what it is. Yeah.
If you've ever been to an event that Mike's at, you'll know he is there to entertain the crowd first and foremost. And if he gets on the podium or he doesn't, he's not fussed, as long as everybody there really enjoys what he puts on. He drives for the fans. He really does with everything he does. And he spends more time getting photos and signing autographs than anyone I've ever met. I've seen him stand in the rain for hours, getting photos with every last kid. And that's just what he does, and he's sacrificed a lot by taking that approach. He's sacrificed wins because he wanted to really stick it to the wall and, all these sorts of things. But that's what's, allowed him to I think, gain that, I don't know, that fellowship, that notoriety, and have that unique influence on not just the sport of drift, but kind of he's transcended more sports than just that.
He has, and that attitude of not always winning, because I do find it funny that there are athletes that obviously that it's very important in terms of what you do, but it's not always the most important. And I think that he typifies that, and I do think that people miss that. That's the golden footnote, that you don't always have to be number one, because if you're number one and you don't really have much of a personality or much of a show, you can't build that sort of cult following that he's amassed over that time.
For sure. And staying true. Like, he's always stayed true,
Very much.
I remember having a conversation with him at one point where he was getting pretty competitive at one point stage in his career, and he didn't want to win everything. And I remember saying to him, I remember this conversation vividly, and he said, I said, if you want to win, mate, you need a more reliable engine. You can't keep running the rotaries, because unfortunately, they just kind of, you run them on such a high spec that they let you down in crucial moments. And he said, I don't care, BT. I'm so committed to rotaries. I love them so much. It's my brand. It's my style. I would rather never win an event again and always drive, rotaries to the max, because that's just how I roll. That's me. And I was like, I'm never going to ask that question again, Mikey. I love that. And
absolutely. You're just there going, preach, can I get an amen? And you're like, yep, right. Because again, I think that they're ridiculous things. But
that's where he made this. We both made this switch, actually. I was at Red Bull still at the time, and he's, looking after him from a Red Bull perspective. And like, you know what? You're going to influence the world through your style more than you are your results. And that was a pretty pivotal moment where we just focused on doing really interesting stuff in the world of motorsport.
And that leads, I think, quite well into the next chapter of this story, a little thing called drift shifters. Yeah. Mate, tell me a story about that.
I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking here.
You are. That's kind of the point. Mate, people aren't here to talk to me. I'm simply the facilitator.
Oh, Scotty, you're too kind. Drift shifters was one which the idea originated loosely the year before I started at Red Bull. Ivan and Mike, Ivan was my predecessor in terms of at Red Bull New Zealand, and they had this idea of sort of, Mike was getting a bit frustrated with judges in his sport, even though he decided to go into a judge sport. Look, he just thought if there was a way to do my sport that made it way more easy for people to understand, I'd love to explore that. So they came up with this idea of drift shifters, which was originally an idea where they took the cars to a skid pan and hugged some boxing bags, and they drifted around, and whoever could hit as many in the right order kind of got it done. And they handed the idea over to me when I started, and I said to Mike, I said, I think we could take this up a notch. And listen, we kind of feel like there needs to be some technology involved here. We need to understand, like, the sport a bit more. What are you judged on? He said speed, style, proximity, angle, and basically competitive. Who's better out of the two of you in doing that? I said, all right, well, if we just do one car at a time, we can judge your proximity probably with some proximity sensors. We could probably find a way to judge your angle when speed's easy, because you just get a speed gun or some sort involved. And style, I guess we just need to make it freestyle, right? So then you can do whatever. And we came up with this idea, all right, and he really wanted to bring it to the people. He wanted to bring his sport away from the racetracks out in the middle of New Zealand. A lot of the racetracks are quite far away from town, so bringing the motorsport to the people was really important. So I engaged this tech company who were renowned for doing very unique tech projects. And they built like security systems for super yachts and for banks, and involved with like sensory tech systems that measured grain silos in dairy farms and these sorts of things. And I said, could you create this? And they said, oh, look, we've got this guy who literally writes code and software as you talk to him. I'm like, okay, well, let's get him. We went out to a track, we bought a bunch of these sensors, and we literally wrote a video game while Mike was drifting next to us. And we thought, all right, how are we going to do angle? Let's set up 2 sensors above it. The closer you get to 90 degrees, the closer they get to triggering exactly the same time to the millisecond, the more points you get. Oh, cool, that's sweet. All right, how do we do proximity? All right, well, let's put sensors here and let's do them at certain distances. And, if you get it within a meter, you get X amount of points. If you get it within a shorter, you get a thing. And, all right, let's put multiple on one corner. And if you get all of them within that close range, let's do a combo like you get in pinball. And anyway, we created this idea, which was a pinball, a high-octane pinball. And I managed to convince some people at Auckland Council to let us have the main street of the city. And, we took it downtown and it worked. And it was pretty special.
And once again, you've gotten used to ringing up people in politics and pitching stupid ideas. Talk me through how that one went. Was that?
Yeah, a little bit like the mayor conversation. I said, hey, we've got this idea. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to sound like, but this is what it's actually going to be. And I said, I've got this platform called Red Bull Media House who can put, your city on the map globally if we get this right. All I need is one street for 24 hours. And that's all I'm asking for. And we closed the street at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. And I had about 30 semi-trailers worth of concrete barriers parked up around the corner. Good mate of mine, Paulie Santo, rigged that up through Viapol, and we were like, all right, let's have this ready to go. And literally, we tested the track out on an airport to the centimetre, so all we needed to do was basically put it in place. And I just had everything come in overnight, and by 11 a.m. the next day, we ran the event. It was all over by 4 o'clock. We had it bumped out by 8 p.m. that night and people cruising back down the road. And I think, there's always a way with council. You've just got to find it,
You've got to find it.
One of the things I always say to people in events is like traffic management's your friend, because you can actually make a city function smoother with traffic management, because once you get rid of traffic lights and just funnel everyone one way, they don't have to stop. So traffic actually becomes faster and smoother if you get it right. So pay as traffic management people extra well, and they'll always help you out with the powers that be.
Mate, pro tips in here. Now, what sort of went through in fair speed there was what a ridiculous 24 hours that was, plus the months of preparation. Coming down to the day of execution, because people who are in events management, understand, I've always talked about it like it's like the snowball. Once that bad boy starts rolling, like you can't stop it. You just got to get out of the way. How did that day unfold?
Oh, it was unreal. I remember my last memory before the event started was it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was on top of the semi-trailer that we parked in the middle of the track. It was pouring with rain, and we're trying to hang some banners over the edge of it so that it looked cool. And this was the truck the Undertaker that everybody drifts underneath, of Tokyo Drift style. And I was sitting on top of that, it was pouring with rain, and I had one of my best mates, Matty Walker, at the time with me there, and he just looked me in the eye and goes, mate, this is miserable. I said, as long as the sun's shining at 11 a.m, mate, I don't care. And we were saturated to the bone doing this branding. But, mate, the day unfolded perfectly. We got way more people than we thought, because in New Zealand, the event was free. So anybody could come. Not only did we bring the first motorsport event to the streets of Auckland, but we did it for free. We had about 30,000 people rocked out, and we're hanging from the trees and from the buildings and from the lampposts. And
wow.
It was unreal. And it just blew everyone's mind because, as you know, being in motorsport, drift cars are pretty phenomenal vehicles. And they're all so different and so quirky, and they sound incredible. And, people were 2 meters away from the concrete. And the interesting thing with that event is it's, I don't say this often, but it's safer than what people realise. It's one car at a time. It's going quite slow speeds, but it's so loud and smoke, and the wheels are going so fast. It's so dynamic that, and the most exciting thing was everybody there could understand it. The 90-year-old grandmas could see the points ticking up on the screens and know what was going on, and the 3 or 4-year-old kids with earplugs in on dad's arms or mum's arms could understand what was going on too, because there was a clock that was counting down, there was points that was going up like a pinball machine. And it was a pretty surreal experience.
Because it just makes sense, and for people that watch competitive drifting, and it's one of the struggles I've seen, particularly with the drift scene in Australia, is there is a really strong grassroots, big style, throwing it in backwards, full send sort of stuff, and then there's the competition, which is your angle, proximity, all these things, which is very impressive. but it's kind of like watching equestrian. So you're looking for the absolute precision there, but you're losing some of the magic that makes the sport special, which is you take whatever you want, power it with whatever you want, and as long as you fit the protocols, I've always liked that style of it where you can very much express your personality. And then, as I said, a lot of that was taken away in the competition. But with what you guys did, as you said, you don't have people there going, hang on, what? Why did he go through? What? When you can see someone driving harder or whatever, and then you're just going, I'm so confused. And that does really get people.
Yeah.
Whereas drift shifters, it explained drifting to people. It made it make sense in such a simple way. But obviously the execution was extremely complex, and there's, again, months of planning there. I can't believe the work that you guys put in to create these things. It's mayhem. Because you're basically...
It was a journey.
Mate, it's like you're just sitting there and going, what's the dumbest thing we can do, mate? That's fucking stupid. Let's do that.
It was constant problem solving, because it was just finding a way to do everything. How do we do that? How do we do that? And I had some really, really great people around me at the time. I had like incredible operations manager, Ruben, and the team at Automation Associates who did all the tech, and Brendan and Gareth. They were phenomenal guys that just had the vision like what Mike and I did. And we wanted to, we were messing with the sport a little bit. So the traditionalists were like, hey, it's what are you really doing here? But we tried to keep it as authentic as possible by sticking to the roots of what it's judged on. So, the scores were on proximity, the scores were on angle, the scores were on speed, and the scores were on line and style. So it all stemmed back to what the sport was all about. And that was really important to Mike. And he had a really strong sense as creative director on what he wanted that to do and what he wanted that story to be. And if it didn't fit, if it wasn't credible, we didn't do it. There was a couple of things that, we wanted to do that it was getting too sort of, I guess you'd say, skew-if and away from the credibility of the sport, and we scratched them, threw them in the bin.
And I appreciate that, the fact that you're trying to keep it true to its roots, but also make it palatable for people. Because I also find that if people go and have a look at a grassroots event, I know I took my wife to some. Well, she wasn't my wife at the time, and I'm not sure how she stuck around, but she came and did, some Dunga drift days with me at it, some turd track somewhere that nobody else would use because it was a go-kart track and we were allowed to use it for drifting. And she's just like, what are you idiots doing? And there was a lot of that. People had come and they're like, what is this? Like, it just real confusion, whereas packaging it up into something like that just made so much sense. And I guess it's exciting to see, where that continued to go. Mate, these stories just keep going. We've got to jump over to the other side of the planet. X Games in LA.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Mate,
so
another
fantastic athlete that I inherited when I came to New Zealand, is a guy by the name of Chris Birch. Anyone who's familiar with two-wheel enduro, won Red Bull Romaniacs back in the day. He's done a couple of Dakars, and very acclaimed two-wheel athlete in New Zealand. We ran an event called Red Bull City Scramble here in New Zealand, where we did a downtown enduro cross track on one of the car parks at a yacht club. You can imagine the conversations getting a two-wheel enduro cross track built on a yacht club car park. That was pretty fun too.
That's impressive.
But off the back of that event and him putting that on, the guys at X Games called us and said, "Hey, Chris, you want to invite to come and do the enduro cross?" And he said, "I've never actually done short course properly, like in a stadium before. I don't really know the first thing about it. Next game was in 4 weeks." And he was just like, "What do I do, BT?" And I said, "Well, mate, what do you want to do?" He's like, "Well, I feel like I'm not underprepared. I'm just going to go and do a Bismarck, and it'll just be a bit of a flop for them and for me." I said, "Well, why don't you say to them, hey, I really want to come, but can you just guarantee me a spot for next year, and I'll train for a year and then come along?" And that's a good idea. So we created this project called the Chris Birch Project. It's on YouTube if you want to check it out. 5-part series. But we basically, after the X Games, I can't remember what year it was, I think it was 2014, we got the copy of their plans, as in like the CAD drawing of the track that they built. And we went and built an exact replica of that track in a little vacant block out in an industrial part of Auckland out here.
Wow.
Literally the whole start ramp out of scaffold. We built the pool, we built the logs, rocks, like identical.
Wow.
we got him to train on it for a year, and we got him more specialist coaching. We got him jump coaching. We got him a personal trainer. We got nutrition sorted, and he even had a kid halfway through. His little beautiful daughter, and I put a demountable out there with a creche set up in it, so his missus and Bubs come and hang out with him. And we didn't tell anyone we were doing this, by the way, and it was quite funny because it was near these industrial area, and all the guys would come out in their forklifts and watch him practice during the day and stuff, and while they're on their snowco.
What is going on here?
And anyway, we went to X Games, and he made the main event. He was coming top 5, and then one of the boys that didn't like the outdoor guy beating him took him out on one of the last corners, and he didn't end up making the podium, but still finished top 10, and that was pretty special.
Oh, weapon! That's incredible.
Yeah, but X Games was just a beast of an event back then, and got to meet some really interesting people and do some fun stuff around that.
Yeah, and shenanigans and after-hours activities. I have to imagine rolling with that lot, you'd find yourself in some interesting places when you're in Los Angeles.
Yeah, one of the highlights was I was on a Red Bull over there, have a double-decker bus with DJ decks on it that they transport their VIPs around to parties and stuff. And
of course
at one point I was on there with Birchie and a bunch of other athletes. Travis Pastrana was there having a yarn, and Ryan Sheckler's on the decks, playing the music because it was his birthday. So yeah, that was back when Shex was killing it and winning every gold medal, and that was quite fun.
Mate, how many athletes did you have in your portfolio in New Zealand?
I think when I started in New Zealand, there was about 8 athletes, and then when I finished, I was over here for nearly 5 years. There was about 16.
Because what were the other sports? Because this is the other thing that's starting to blow my mind as you unfold these things that I at least have an awareness of. But as I think you're doing this for each of these athletes, I'm like, bloody hell.
Yeah, every year I tried to do at least something with every athlete, whether it was an event or a project or a performance-enhancing moment or supporting some form of dream or moment or something, even just trying to get them deals. But I had a really diverse mix back then. I had Chuck Berry, who was a base jumper, skydiver, wingsuit athlete, and Ben Brown, who was an incredible whitewater kayaker, now a professional fisherman. Used to have Levi Sherwood, Nick Franklin in freestyle motocross. Levi was at the peak then. He was winning. I think he won 3 X-Fighters championships around those years, and had endurance athletes like Braden Curry, Chris Birch, Mad Mike. Even brought on board some sailors that were in the sailing side of things and got to know the sailing world a little bit, and had BMX.
They're hardcore. Those sailing, they're mental.
What was amazing actually was not just the athletes that I got to look after for Red Bull in New Zealand, but because New Zealand was such a sport mecca for a lot of those action adventure, sports, all of the Red Bull athletes from around the world would come down, whether it's in the opposite winter or summer, depending on their sport.
And then you'd have to obviously host and show them around and explain why you couldn't buy Queenstown. Fantastic.
Yeah, everything. If there was a nitro circus in town, you'd be looking after their whole tour. If they were in, we did high performance camps for snow and bike, and at one point I had 18 of the world's best snowboarders and skiers in Queenstown, and for 2 weeks, and all these high performance coaches. And I obviously don't coach. I'd never even seen snow before this, but putting it all on and organising the things behind the scenes was really special.
I am exhausted thinking about all this, like the mental load of that job. It does strike me as a younger person's job. That is a full-time 7-day a week. Like that occupies every ounce of your brain space, I have to imagine. Yeah,
there's lots going on, but when you work in an energy drink company, you don't have an excuse for no energy.
Yeah, so you got no problem. So you can refill the tank if you're a bit low. I'm sure there's always a fridge somewhere nearby. Bloody hell! Must be a special recipe in the offices as well, mate. Back over to Perth, I've got a little note here about a drone show.
Yeah. So I guess Red Bull World. I finished up Red Bull in New Zealand in the end of 2016. I did a short stint with iLab, a Kiwi clothing company, as they were expanding internationally, and then I snuck back to Perth. To where family and friends were from. I brought my wife, girlfriend at the time, wife by the time I got home to New Zealand, and then we moved back to Perth and worked at Crown Resorts for a little while, and then ended up heading up as the general manager of Celebrate WA, which runs the WA Day Festival, which is the state's biggest free, you say, community event. They normally get about 120,000 people across 2 days for a sort of community outdoor festival. Everything from music to activations to sideshow stuff and that sort of thing. And right at the end of COVID, I took that role, and it wasn't looking like the borders were going to open in WA. Back then, no one was getting let in or out, and big events weren't happening, all that sort of thing. And it got to end of March. WA Day is the first weekend of June, and the government said, "No, we're opening up, and we want WA Day to be the big first event that happens outside of the stadium. So let's make it a really good one." Government were major funders of the event at the time, and there was a company in Perth that just basically bought 500 drones, the biggest drone fleet in Australia at the time. And so I went and chatted to them. I said, "Guys, we got 8 weeks. Do you reckon you could pull something together?" And they said, "Yeah, what's your ideas?" So I had to creatively come up with a concept. We could only do one day of the festival instead of 2, because the venue which we had was right next to the main stadium in Perth, and they had a footy game on one of the days. We couldn't have clouds crashing. Anyway, so we bundled into one day, and just all the stars aligned. It was perfect weather. No one had seen a drone show before. Had 7 West Media help us out with marketing and promotions for it, and they just went over the top with how much they pushed it. We ended up with about 200,000 people coming down across the day and lining the river and the banks. And it was way too many people, but it managed to go off without a hitch. And we put a drone show in the sky that made everyone laugh and smile and go home happy. And pulling that off an 8-week lead was quite interesting.
That's bloody wild. And what's happened here, and you touched on it, that you did a bit of work with iLab as well, so helping push that into Australia. But between Red Bull, iLab, and that specific drone activation, there was 4 years with a little company called Crown.
Yeah.
You would have learned a few things there. Probably not quite as loose in the same sense that you've been working with, but I have to imagine that was a fairly fascinating time commercially.
It was. It was a very unique business working for Crown Resorts, obviously Australia's biggest integrated resort and casino. An incredible business to work for. I really got to understand what being part of big business was. Part of the reason why I took the role there and was actually because I wanted to understand how that big business worked. And the interesting with them is they're a casino, they were hotels, they were restaurants, they were bars, they were theatres. They're everything to everyone there, and the Perth site where I was based had 5,000 staff. So besides the airport, had 50,000 footfall a week. So it's a big place, and the things that happen in and around casinos are very unique, especially back then, sort of pre-COVID and all that sort of thing. It was interesting, and towards the end of it, it was even more interesting because there was royal commissions and a few different things like that going on. I tapped out just sort of as that was sort of commencing, so I didn't get to see too much of that. But very interesting business. Love my time there.
Yeah, I'll bet. And what was most eye-opening about that? Because going from Red Bull to that, I mean, that is a very different approach from action sports to commercial and
my role was head of partnerships. So I looked after the partnerships and sponsorships for Crown Resorts. And thankfully, a big chunk of their sponsorships and partnerships revolved around sport. So they looked after everything AFL, everything basketball. They worked with a lot of the sporting franchises. They worked with V8 Supercars. They worked with the AFL. They worked with the NRL. They were on the jerseys of the Rabbitohs. And then we used to look after a lot of the national and international teams when they came to town as well. And, probably one of the more interesting experiences I had was looking after the Premier League teams when they came to town. So we hosted Chelsea and we hosted Manchester United and those sort of big franchises that, in my eyes, and particularly Manchester United, are just on a whole other level. They are the most elite of elite franchises in the world, and get to experience them up close and personal was really interesting.
Well, that's it. And you think back to 13-year-old Brendan, who wanted to work in that world, to then be there managing their day-to-day activities as they came through, and that just being part of the job. That's certainly ticking off a lot more of those boxes.
Yeah, yeah, and it was nice not only to get to work with sort of those high-end branches, but I got to look after all the community partnerships and relationships that the Crown had. Obviously, when you're a casino, you got to do the right thing by the community as well. So there's about 25 different charities and community partners that we looked after, and
Right.
you know,
And you were tip of the spear on that. You'd be out with the community groups going, here's, what do you need? How can we help? How can we best
yeah, yeah. It was
utilise?
basically, I guess, this unique little funnel where every community partnership, if they wanted support, the request would come through us. We'd assess it, put forward our recommendation to the leadership executive team, and if they said yes, then we'd roll it out with the different departments internally. And yeah, I have to say, like although it's easy for casinos just to throw cash at things to do the right thing, they really cared. They did it the right way. And that was always nice. There was real genuine people and sort of stories behind it, and they were very good at engaging their staff. Like, we did a lot of things to engage the 5,000 staff.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that. And that's the thing. It's easy for big organisations. That's the problem when they are such a big organisation. There's so many things going on, but it always comes down to the people in the roles and what they get to do. And there's always people doing good things. When you see that sort of opportunity there, and you've got those sort of resources. And the sort of reach that you'd have through that business, you'd have the capacity to do a lot of good.
For sure. And just learned so many industries under one roof. Like, I learned the casino industry, I learned the hotel industry, I learned, I knew a bit about the bars and restaurants, but I didn't understand the operational side of things of them as much as what I learned there. And yeah, even theatres, the theatre in the Crown Theatre in Perth is huge, the biggest theatre in the state, and just some of the things that used to roll through there were next level. And when you've got 1,500 bedrooms above your office, and Crown Towers being like the nicest 5-star hotel in the state, there was always a lot of interest, things going on.
Never a dull day.
Never.
Mate. And I've got a note here about Story hosting Man U. Is that
Manchester United.
Is that safe for TV? No.
Oh, they are unbelievable. Like, they are just on a whole other level. I think they came in for one soccer team to come for a 2-game pre-season. They stayed for 10 days and probably spent close to $5 million staying with us. So it was
good customer.
Biggies. Coming in private jets and, having people there playing on the field that earn more than probably you and I earn combined in our careers in 2 days. Just unbelievable sort of money. But I had a funny story because myself and the sales director there, we thought we'd take out the management team on a nice day to say thanks for staying with us. And yeah, we did booked a few little things. We booked a helicopter, took them to a winery, then took us over to Rottnest Island, and got a friend to pick us up over there after lunch in their boat, and cruised back. And we popped into one of the Little Creatures brewery, and then we were going to go down the Swan River and get dropped at a nice restaurant. And the skipper took the left side of the pylon instead of the right side, and we ended up beaching this Riviera on a sandbank in the middle of the Swan River.
Whoops.
With 5 of the Manchester United executives on board. And we were like, oh no, this is not good.
Bloody awkward.
Thankfully, we bought a couple extra boxes of beer from the brewery, and we had a couple of bottles of whiskey and some cigars, and we made a good night of it. And once Sea Rescue came and grabbed us and got us off the boat, and they dropped a bit of water, it just floated off the sandbank and cruised off. But it was a very memorable night getting beached in the Swan River. Some people.
Mate, you'll have to write a book one day. You got some bangers in this thing. Now they're within look at worlds colliding. Ian Baker and World Time Attack Challenge. How on earth did these paths cross?
Yeah, mate, Ian is an absolute legend of a human. I know you've had him on your podcast before, and that guy's got more passion and energy than most people I've ever met. And the relationship first started with him when was it? I think it was when I just finished at Red Bull and I was working at iLab, and Mike, he invited Mike over to the event back in, I want to say it was about 2017, and Mike went along and I went along with iLab, and we set up a stall and sold a bit of merch there, and ran Mike's sort of merch shop, and as well as sold some iLab gear, and when they were really humming, and got to know Baker then, and we just had a couple of beers one day, and he sort of got wind that I'd done a bit of stuff in events, and asked my thoughts on his event, and I gave him a couple of thoughts, and he thought I was a pretty, an all right dude. So next time I was in Sydney, I had a couple more beers, and he said, "Would you do a bit of work for me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I helped him out the next year on the event after I'd finished the iLab. Just flew over there and helped him out behind the scenes, and him and his marketing director at the time, Alan. I just kind of helped run the little expo area. I guess you'd say it wasn't that little that time, actually. It was really humming. And yeah, I think they liked my style and I fit the team well. And yeah, ever since then, I've always just thrown a bone. He's thrown me a bone and said, "Come and help us." And yeah, now I kind of help curate the talent side of things and work with Dan Mackey on the drift side of things, and make sure that sort of, the right people are in the right spots at the event, and just do my little bit under his weapon team. So,
because what he's built, and this is a wonderful story, like the way that worlds collide. I mean, I was involved back when he first kicked it off, because my role back then was actually with Nismo and Motul, and sort of helped to get a few things in the door then. And I just remember his enthusiasm when he spoke to me, and he's like, "I've got this thing," and it's just, and I remember thinking, this is the maddest shit I've ever heard. Who the fuck's going to ship their car to Australia? But mate, I love your style.
Yeah,
let's give it a rip, and see what happens. And what he has created is it speaks for itself, and it's now just one of those events that people look forward to. They build for it, they prepare for it. And it is just one of those wonderful reunions of motorsport family that when you go to World Time Attack Challenge, the on-track is fantastic, but also just being there. Like, it's just the bloody best. It is absolutely the bloody best. And I just couldn't believe that. When I went, hang on a sec, this whole thing, it is, motorsport is a very, very small world. When a bloke you accidentally meet at Goodwood is behind the scenes making those things happen. But mate, these things all sort of cross over. You've obviously done quite a lot by this point, and you've gone, look, I really enjoy all these things. I've worked for a lot of companies, but you've gone, I want to get this under my own wing. And you've obviously gone out on your own and started delivering these things in your unique way, with the skills and contacts that you've amassed over these varied, insane projects.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. COVID came at a really unique time for me, because drift shifters was a bit of a catalyst. I'm like, you know what, I really just want to run my own events agency one day. So when I finished at Red Bull, I started my own agency called Authentic Events, and that was sort of just to keep my fingers in the pie a little bit from a drift shifter's perspective. And I got a call from Red Bull UK in 2017. They said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing drift shifters in the UK. Would you be keen to run it?" I said, "Yep, sure." So I contracted to Red Bull UK to run Red Bull drift shifters. Now, keep in mind, this is after I finished at Red Bull, so I was the sport director for that. Headed that up, went over to Liverpool, delivered the event over there. It was unreal, and convinced Red Bull to spend a big chunk of money on a new technology system that was completely wireless. So we got that system in 2019, and 3 countries, Russia, Ireland, and Denmark, all committed to drift shifters in 2020. So we went through the process of testing for all 3 events. We set up the courses, designed them, everything like that, wrote all the software in New Zealand. We packed all the technology, all Mike's car and 2 other Kiwi cars in a container, sent them off to Denmark, and then, someone ate a bat and closed down the world. And the technology and the cars did a lap all the way to Denmark. And we never got to do those 3 events, obviously, because of the way things happened. So it all came back. But coming back to your question, the reason why I said that is because at the start of 2020, I was actually going to hand in my resignation at Crown and start my own business. We'll go into Authentic Events full time. And the 3 drift shifters was going to kind of kick it off, and then I was going to try and fill the summer with a whole range of other events and athlete, sort of projects and things like that. And obviously that didn't happen because I didn't have that backbone. I didn't have that sort of that 2-year sort of plan where there was going to be multiple events that I would guarantee and all that sort of thing. So that sort of pulled the handbrake on that, and that led me to the Celebrate WA opportunity, And I did the year at Celebrate WA, and that was a not-for-profit organisation. I got to learn working under a board and all that sort of thing. But the passion to run my own thing and do sports management and athlete management just ran too deep. And I remember sitting down with a friend of mine, my name is Damien Martin, and he was doing a bit of sports athlete management stuff for a company, and we had a chat and said, hey, why don't we do our own? So we combined forces, and I parked Authentic Events, popped that in the bin. We created Space Collective, which Space stands for Sports, Projects, Athletes, Consulting and Events. And that's what we do. We just focus on, I head up more the project and event management side of the business. He leads our talent recruitment for athlete management. I still look after motorsports and manage a few motorsport athletes. And yeah, that's just sort of led us down this path. We've got some fantastic business partners that have been lucky enough to throw a couple of dollars in behind the scenes to help two of us work on it full time straight off the bat, and we're just having a red hot crack. We're a year deep. We've got 34 athletes under management between Space Collective and Promondo Sports, and we've got a couple of big events. We're running the world final for Red Bull cliff diving in New Zealand, helping them deliver that. So got a few bits and pieces in the cards that I'm really proud of where we're at. So young on.
As you bloody well should be. And I started learning this story while we were having, I think it was JD and Cokes, because you were kind enough to take me under your wing when the boys had to go to the ball at Goodwood. And you hooked me up with Billy Bolt as well, who's another hilarious weapon of a human being, and I had no idea what a weapon he was until I looked him up. And you sort of started explaining all these bits and pieces to me, and I'm like, what? I'm so confused, and I didn't quite understand the depth of what you did here, and knowing what I know about events and motorsport and all these things, like these are difficult places to break into. They're difficult places to stay in. They're like all of this. This is not a career that you choose lightly. This is not something you do because you're hoping to have lots of days off. And as fun as it is to travel and go to lots of kick-ass events and hang out with cool people, there is a very real price to be paid for all this. Like it is hard work, and mate, you still do it with a smile on your face and more shenanigans coming out. Like you've and I know this all sounds silly, but like you've built the dream, you've done it, and I know that that's the hard part because you're only just getting started. But tell me a little bit about where it's all going, because I've got a stack of other notes here, but I'd love to hear a little bit about like even how you ended up at Goodwood and these sorts of things, like, under your own banner.
Well, I mean for us, the vision for Space Collective and Promondo Sports is to, in essence, just bring a new style to athlete and event management. We found that in the athlete management world, representing athletes in most sports, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, there's a very traditional approach. The management agencies, the big ones, tend to focus on one or two sports. They go really deep in those sports, and they do very top line management for their athletes. So they'll have between 50 and 100 athletes, most of them, sometimes more, in AFL or in basketball or in whatever, cricket, footy, rugby, whatever you kind of want. And they focus just on basically managing their playing career, and in terms of like getting them their next contract with the team, and then they move on. And they don't kind of worry too much about all the other layers that come with being a professional athlete, things like their financial management, their personal growth, their career after sport, their health and well-being, their mental health, and all these other layers. And they also don't really coach and more focus on their brand and how they build their own brand, and are they making the best decisions for their career and that sort of thing. So we sort of took an approach where we want to do a more holistic service for athlete management. We want to help define and build their brand and work with athletes that actually have a vision for their career outside of just being the best on the field or the track or whatever it might be. So we've delved into that. One of my business partners is a very well-known basketballer. His name's Damien Martin, captained the Wildcats for a lot of years. The NBL Defensive Player of the Year has been named after him, and he's a fantastic human. And we really wanted to just do athlete management differently, and we're doing that, and that's working well for us. And on the athlete and project side, we sort of felt that traditional sponsorships have gone in our mind. Not gone, but like brands don't just want to put their logo on an athlete or put their product on an athlete, and that's it. They want to tell stories. They want content. They want a journey. They want projects and platforms to build alongside of, and athletes So it's really important that athletes focus on their craft, the best they possibly can be in that. So we really feel that being the management side, we can pitch ideas to brands and that sort of thing that involve those athletes. So rather than going to them and say, hey, do you just want to sponsor this person? They'll wear your shoes or they'll put your brand on their shirt or whatever it might be. We go to them and go, hey, this athlete's got this project. We think it's really cool. We think your brand fit would go well. Or reverse engineer it. We go to the brand and go, hey, what does your marketing plan look like? What do you want to focus on? What's the target market you want to reach? Hey, we've got these athletes that we think would be really cool there. Let's come up with a project or an event that might fit it. So, yeah, that's the vision. Just connecting really interesting people that have great personality, are great high performers, and have the potential to do really rad stuff with beautiful brands and businesses.
And this is where I can see your experience and the work that you've done in Red Bull. And I understand, again, from an outsider's point of view, that there is a lot of work. And Billy was actually telling me a bit about it, how they go to Austria and how they take care of the athlete as a whole. And it's not just the performance, but it's also the mental preparation and these sorts of things. And I recall him saying to me that was not something that he'd ever really put thought into. Because again, he's just like, how do I get the most out of the bike? And then he's like, that just opened my eyes to how much more I can be doing when he went to Austria took part in those activities. And I think that that's really quite extraordinary.
Yep. Yeah, it is, and I learned a lot of incredible things from Red Bull. I've got to be thankful for them for everything that I learned while I was there. But their approach to caring for athletes and their well-being is really important. And Mike is one of the athletes that I help look after at the moment and represent from a management perspective. And his fantastic son Lincoln Whiddett as well, who's really starting to cut his teeth now as a 15-year-old in both 4-wheel and 2-wheel. But the way that we kind of approach things is to do things differently, and that led us to Goodwood. And the conversations that we had there, were one thing, but it was also working hard behind the scenes to secure Mike and other motorsport athletes, either projects or events or deals behind the scenes. And as you know, that event is at the mecca of motorsport globally.
Oh, mate, it's unbelievable. I still. In the drivers club and walking past, and I'm like, hang on, who's that bloke? And you're like, that was Ryan Atkinson. And then, like, I'm washing my hands at the basin and look across, and you're, it's Jensen Button, like, standing here next to me, and I'm just talking smack with Jensen. And you're there going, this is the whole thing is just surreal, and it's done at a level that I've never seen because we don't have the population density to pull off things like that. When you go though and see those things, it just gives you that level to aim at. In terms of what you're doing. But tell me a story. While you were over there, you got to do something. There was an activation that you did with a bloke that steers little open wheelers.
So that Goodwood trip was probably 2.5 weeks of the most intense work I think I've ever done back to back. But it actually started off in Italy. Went to the Italy cliff diving, Red Bull cliff diving event, and shadowed the sport director there because of running the final event here in January in New Zealand. So it started there. Then I whipped across to just a little place just out of Silverstone near where the Red Bull F1 team are based, and Mike was invited to come and teach Max Verstappen how to drift. On the Thursday before Silverstone F1, which is, for those who know the industry, that Silverstone is the week before Goodwood. We went there, and they hellied Max in, and he threw him in the passenger seat with Mike for one lap in his RX-7. And then Mike gave him the 101, and he hopped in the driver's seat. And keep in mind, this is the first time Mike's ever given anyone the keys to one of his drift cars to actually drift ever. And he gave the keys to Max, and Max got in a rotary on the wrong side of the car with a stick shift and a handbrake and a full-size, steering wheel, not just a little half one. And mate, he was fantastic. He just Mike gave him 101, jumped in the passenger seat, and a few of his words were, give it more stick, and he did. And by the end of it, he was drifting around what they set up as Horner Corner. And he had 10 big, giant, oversized hands that he had to hit, and he got 8 out of 10. It was pretty impressive.
And that all by itself is like, if you only ever did just that one thing by itself, you're like, that's a good story. I could live on that for a long time. But like, that's just one of many things that you've done across the weeks. And I'm there going, who is this
Yeah,
guy? He's
yeah,
Batman.
that was really
Like,
fun.
mate, that's ridiculous. And also, I don't think it can be understated the fact that Mike let somebody else drive the car. I mean,
Yeah,
understood it's Max Verstappen, and you sort of go, look, if I'm going to let anyone drive it, probably pretty safe with him.
yeah, yeah.
But that's a big deal, letting somebody else
Was
drive your baby that you
yeah,
have developed over that time.
yeah.
But I'm sure even he was pretty stoked.
Oh, he was. There's
What
some
was
really
his? Was he chuffed? Was he like,
who, Mark or
oh,
Max?
both, mate? Tell me the story from both sides. I want to hear both of them.
Yeah, there's some really cool behind the scenes clips actually on YouTube that are worth checking out. Because yeah, Red Bull and a couple of other brands did some really nice behind the scenes, and they do show the real authentic version. That's one thing I like about Red Bull, and particularly that project, was that it's very authentic. What you see actually happened, and you know they don't hide anything. But yeah, Mike was just pumped to see someone adapt so quickly in what's notoriously quite an aggressive and hard car to drive. Max was blown away by how much grip and how responsive the car was, which sounds really crazy from a Formula One driver. I think his interpretation of what drift was that there's a lot of lack of control and a lack of grip, whereas it's the opposite when you get delve into the sport. And he was blown away by how much grip and how responsive it was. And for Mike and Mike's team, they loved hearing that. They loved hearing that the car they built, particularly Mike's OG car, like Max was so impressed by. And then we were all impressed. Even Max, he kind of surprised himself, I think, at how quickly he picked it up, you know, and how naturally, which sounds silly when you say it out loud, because he's world number one Formula One driver, right? The guy can probably put him in front of anything and he'd steal the wheels off it. But how quickly he picked up something, you know, that was so foreign to him, you know, like
Oh,
just
so far,
unreal.
and such a severe car as well, and with the rotary,
Yeah,
and then the way that you have to drive it, and
correct.
and,
Yeah,
and again, learning that that grip concept. That, as you said, people who don't understand it think that it's just sideways burnouts, but they don't understand that people are running, you know, very serious slick compounds to actually have more grip, to have better control, and that's something that does always catch people. I just think that is such a cool story, and again, it's that opportunity. Some of the phone calls, and you'd still be used to it. I mean, mate, you'd really have to get a weird phone call to be surprised these days, wouldn't you?
yeah,
Can we chuck Max in the rotary and go drifting? And you're like, yeah, I'm sure we can figure it out. Like,
yeah,
mate, you
yeah.
would have some of the most bizarre conversations, I have to imagine.
Yeah, yeah. When the phone rings, I still get surprised about some of the questions you get and some of the people you talk to and some of the ideas you throw around. Like part of that trip, we spent some time with the Formula One team exploring a confidential project. I can't even tell you about at the moment, but something that'll be in the future. And you know, and then we did another project with an event called the Red Bull Hardline, which is the downhill mountain bike event, basically the hardest downhill mountain bike course on earth, which is in Wales. And we took Mike's trophy truck, like stadium truck, up there, and he basically threw a guy by the name of Matt Jones, a mountain biker, in the passenger seat, and chased or raced some downhill mountain bikers down the track. And you know, that was unreal too. You know, so we did that in the same period when we were up there. So um, yeah, it's really good fun. And yeah, some of the phone calls you get when you're looking after someone like Mike, and some of the places and people that gets to experience, and not only in the past but looking ahead, some of the things that are coming up through exciting.
Mate, if you haven't already started writing a book, I hope you've got some notes there, because a life in sport management, mate, I would read that book. Because can I share with you something quite funny that I haven't told
Yeah.
a lot of people? I actually have a degree in sport management.
Hey, here we go. Here we go. Is this going to turn into an interview? You want a job?
Nah, I don't think I could keep up with you, mate.
You're doing pretty well, mate. I like yours.
Mate, I look at what you do and I'm like, I'm too old for this. But I find it really hilarious that was something that I did, because I just wanted to be around it. But the only thing I was good at was what I refer to as the colouring in and the making, you know, bringing the razzle dazzle to it. And then to meet somebody who does the exact same thing and has had a not dissimilar but significantly, you know, intense career path. I haven't crossed paths with a lot of people that do this. It is a small space, And it's fascinating listening to your approach, because the things that you say are very similar to the things that I say to people, because working in comms media, you've sort of got your finger on the pulse of what happens and how people are, relating to things, and your comments around sponsors and what they expect, and the fact that, a chunk of change to have your logo on something, just that, like, that's so long gone.
Mm-hmm.
But there are still people asking for that. I think something I'm super interested to know from you, and hopefully for people listening as well, for people that are trying to build a career in sport, what do you say to people that come and ask that question? Go, I want to be, a mega athlete. I want to be the next Mad Mike. Mate, what's your pro tips?
Yeah, it's a question. I often get two questions. How did they get there, and how did you get there? And obviously we've delved into my story and how I got there, but I guess the answer that I give, if they want to be someone like Mad Mike, is find your passion and do nothing but it, and do it really, really well. And it sounds silly when you just say it that simply, but honestly, like, Mike has come from nothing, and been so appreciative of everything he's ever got, and always tipped more in than what he's got out for those early years. A lot of people forget the hard graft he did early on. I could tell you a million and one stories of him and his beautiful partner Tony, like living in the mezzanine level of a factory unit out back blocks of Auckland industrial area, and him to just be able to drift on the weekends. He'd be doing signs for people's businesses and wrapping other people's race cars, and then at midnight he'd start working on his car for the race day the next day. And his family living in a mezzanine sweatshop above it. Like, he sacrificed so much to be there. But I mean, the things that I always say is just focus on what you're really passionate about, and try and surround yourself with really, really good people. You can't do it on your own. You need a team, especially athletes that are in sports that are maybe a little bit more niche or don't have that mainstream structure. You've really got to surround yourself with good people, and don't be scared to ask for help, and ask for favours. Everyone will help someone out if they're passionate, they're genuine.
And I think that's a big one. I think people are often surprised at how helpful others will be, particularly if you're just a good human. Like, if you're just not a dick and you're just nice to people, it's shocking how when you go, oh, hey, what do you know about this? Or can you point me in the right direction? Like, people are generally very happy to help, because I have people who come and ask me similar questions to the ones that you get asked when they find out about things that I tinker around with in the background. And my answers are always the same as well. It's, build your own brand. You put time and effort into yourself, curate it, learn it, study it, look at people who do it well, and put the effort into those things. But I find that doesn't seem to be the advice that gets through to people. It just doesn't seem to connect, and I don't understand why it doesn't connect. Like, what school are people going to where they don't get these things that I say over and over and over again to anybody that'll listen to me? I am here speaking to you saying the exact same things, and yet people think I'm talking crazy talk.
Yeah. There's no shortcuts, like there really isn't. But what I did in my career was just do as much as possible with the time I had, and don't miss opportunities. That's some of the experiences that I got were most invaluable when I wasn't getting paid. When I was doing it in my own time, I went on sacrificed something. I'd sacrificed. I'd take an annual leave instead of going on a holiday. I'd go and work on an event that I just didn't want to. I didn't want an Red Bull air race, the caliber of that event, to be in my city and not be part of it, not learn from it. Whereas other people would be like, just go to it and then go, oh, I want to work at Red Bull. Well, go and work at the event for Red Bull. You know what I mean? Like, just make it happen. Find a way in. That's what I say. It's just sort of sounds silly, but don't force your own agenda. If you really want to do it, find a way to make it happen. What's the worst you're going to get? A no. That's easy to accept.
Mate, I could actually talk to you about all these things for hours, but I've also been keeping a close eye on the time. Because you've dialed in with me on a work day and made a couple of hours for me, and you roll straight into another meeting after this. And I'm going to try and be considerate of that and give you give you a few minutes between them. Because BT, I'm just stoked that you've given me this time to share your story and to go through it with you, and that's something that I really appreciate. It's never lost on me that, you know, I'm asking a lot of people to come on, share their stories, tell all these things, make all these things public, and that is never lost on me. And I am grateful at the opportunity to share your story, mate. I really am. I think it's an absolute cracker, and I hope that people who listen to this take things away from it, and that style of attitude, people who want to do these things or look to do the sorts of things that you do, and they go, okay, so this is possible. Like, this isn't rocket science. You've just got to get in and get it done.
Yeah, mate, I appreciate the kind words. I mean, from my side, I've always tried to be fairly behind the scenes. Everything I do is about the people experiencing the event or experiencing the athlete or seeing what they do. And I find myself just being this funnel or enabler of really cool things to happen. And yeah, I mean, like you, mate, you surround yourself with good people, you get involved in some pretty cool things. And, you know, I've managed to work my butt off and land in a spot where I'm doing what I'm genuinely passionate about and trying to make ends meet like you do with small business. But at the same time, when you surround yourself with good people, you do what you're passionate about and you do it the right way, the stars tend to align with good things. And I've got, like I said, some good support and some great business partners, and yeah, we just go for it. And I appreciate the time that you've given me, and I haven't spoken about my career like this before. Really, I'm in a public forum. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
And that's why I feel privileged, because I'm the bloke that managed to convince you to actually. And this is the thing that people probably don't understand about the podcasting, is how much time I spend chatting to each person before they come on. There's quite often 3 months between when I first speak to somebody and go, hey, would you be interested, to when we actually do it. And there's an enormous journey, because it is something, and it's something that I try to do every time, is just make sure that people understand I'm not here to play gotcha. I'm not here to throw you under the bus. I genuinely find people just endlessly fascinating. And I especially find people who go and they just want to make something of themselves and they want to do something special, because the stories are always the same. They're like, I wanted to do this thing. It didn't make a lot of sense to people, but in my head, I knew exactly what I wanted and I just belted it in that direction until I figured it out.
Yeah.
And I love that story. And I hope that people who listen to this and have their own aspirations to do their own ridiculous things realise that it's actually not that far away. And there will be people in your life who say, that's just not a good idea and that's just not going to work. And mate, they're wrong. Like, if you truly believe in what you're doing, it is astonishing what you're capable of.
Agree. I always say, you talked about me maybe writing a book one day. I'm not much of a writer, but I kind of envisage my life being more like a coffee table book, just lots of cool images that can kind of talk to. That's my vision for my life. I want to sit back on a rocking chair and just go flick a page. Oh yeah, let's talk about that story. That was a fun day or a fun week or a fun month.
That'd be a cracker, actually. And some of those shots as a coffee table book, just to flick through and be able to show the grandkids, and you go, mate, Pa, back in his day, he was a gangster. Like, check out the sick stuff that I used to do, and you sitting there talking about your lawn and smoking meats, and but there on the coffee table, mate, that's Pa's rockstar days. Mate, thank you. I know that you don't share a lot of these things publicly, and I know that you're not really putting these things all over the internet. But perhaps in terms of your businesses or things that people could look up or look into if they want to learn more and find out more about what you do and how it all works, or perhaps are part of a sports team or are an athlete that are making something of themselves and all these vibes with them, and they go, hang on, I've never heard of this BT dude. I've never heard of space. Hang on a sec. How do I get around this?
Yeah. The usual channels, mate. But if you want to, check out spacecollective.au on the web. That's our website there, or Promondo Sports if you're into basketball or golf. That's where our you can check out all the athletes that we represent, and check out some of the events that we've done or the services we offer. And if you're an aspiring athlete or someone who wants to have a chat, even just ask a few questions about how to approach certain things, more than happy to have a phone call and give you a few insights. And if you're a brand or business that wants to bring to life any unique projects or events with anyone we look after, or even just on their own, I'm happy to throw ideas around. And no idea is a bad idea. You got something crazy, bring it to me, and we'll find a way to make it happen.
Bloody oath. That's what your CV says. It says, if it's a good idea, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
BT, thank you. You're a bloody legend. I appreciate this time, mate. I'm going to let you go, but I can't say it enough, mate. Thank you.
No, pleasure and a privilege. I love what you do. Keep it up, mate. It's an awesome podcast, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be. I think episode was it 51. I think we're up to now
51. Thank you for keeping an eye on that. Absolutely, we're telling stories that otherwise would not be told.
Correct, mate. Correct. You should be very proud about that, mate. You've had some fantastic talent on board, and I look forward to seeing who you get in the future.
Oh yeah, mate. It's exactly the same as you. I have lofty goals. So watch this space. Watch this space.
Yeah,
well, for everybody who's listening and made it to the end of this podcast, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time on the All Red Everything podcast.
I'm dangerous. I'm dangerous.